look at the church in Antioch. Really in Acts chapters 11 through 13, we'll see this church that was founded kind of by missionaries. Like right after the stoning of Stephen, people began to flee after persecution began. And this church was really the very first place where followers of Jesus were first called Christians. This place is the church where they began to send out a lot of missionaries throughout the area. Most notably, you would think of Paul and Barnabas. And if you've got one of those Bibles that has all the maps in them, you'll see kind of those arrows where Paul and Barnabas would start a missionary tour, and they would have the arrows going a certain way, and then it would kind of weave back. And they would come back to the church, and they would come back to give report on all the great things that God has been doing. They would give report on the things that they've been maybe struggling with or that they've seen as difficult on the field. They would come back maybe just for a time of just kind of like a respite and to kind of maybe get a break for some things, and then also and to get funding to continue the ministry. And this Antioch model has proved to be a very successful way of us kind of doing missions as a church. We've been doing it this way for a little over 100 years now in the Assemblies of God, and it's proved to be very successful. Just wanted to show you just a little bit of some numbers just to kind of prove just the success rate of just kind of what this model has done throughout the world. So just as the Assemblies of God, not just church in general, but just within the Assemblies of God, the past 100 years, as of today, this is an accumulative number. Just as of right now, we have 2,641 missionaries serving throughout the world in 103 different countries, resulting in 383,736 productive local churches. And as a result of us here in the Assemblies of God following this Antioch model, every 30 seconds, someone in the world is coming to faith in Jesus through one of these AG churches alone. And every 66 minutes, a new church is being planted. And I love seeing this model thrive. I think it's already been mentioned from the platform this morning, but it's great to see even just Micah from your own congregation being somebody that has been raised up here and sent out and is doing missions work, even though some people are trying to keep her here. But it's great to hear that this church is not only supporting other missionaries from other congregations, but within the assemblies, but also people that are coming up right out of your own congregation. And I think that's ideal. That's really the goal. That's what we strive to do as a church and as the individual churches themselves. And this happened in my life as well. I grew up in a church. I was there all the way up until really I left for the mission field. So I was at the same church for 32 years, I guess, or about 30 years. And so I know my son's trying to do math here. Not really, how old is Dad? But I grew up down in Springfield. I went to Evangel Temple, and it was a wonderful church that poured into me. They always had missionaries come up and give report like we're doing today about all the great things that God is doing. A lot of times they would bring all kinds of garb from their country. They'd have a big snake skin or things that would captivate children as well. And I got really intrigued with missions and went on my first mission trip when I was just 12 years old to Nuevo Laredo, Mexico. And there just God began to really speak to me and was able to even just use me as a 12-year-old on a missions trip and got to experience just kind of the wonderful just the way that just God can use those missions teams through churches out there on the field. And he used me on that trip, and he used me on multiple trips after that. I was able to go on one or two, sometimes even 3 trips a year, all the way until I went to college. And then after that, after grad school, then I took a trip to West Africa. And it was on this trip that things kind of started to take a little bit of a turn in my life. I went to the country of Ghana in West Africa, and while I was there, I went down the coastline to the Elmina Castle. And this was the very first building that was built to start facilitating the transatlantic slave trade. And as I took a tour of this facility, just God really began to burden my heart for the issue of slavery and of human trafficking and the things that had gone on there on that property specifically. And then I was on my way back home, and so I left Ghana. I got on the airplane. On my way back home, I had a layover in the Netherlands, and so I had a long layover in Amsterdam. At the time, I was trying to get to every country in the world. I thought maybe one day I'll be rich and I'd like to see everything. So I was trying to check off every country in the world off of a list, and I only made it to around 20 or 25. But I wanted to get the longest layover I could in the Netherlands just so I could walk around and see the city as much as I could, unlike your pastor who spent about 5 seconds outside the airport in Brussels, and he checked that country off. But I wanted to authentically experience 7 hours in a country. So I just kind of wandered the streets of Amsterdam. And as I did that, I began to see some things and see some areas of need. And I stumbled upon the red light district while I was there. And again, just seeing the people for sale in the windows of this area of town. Again, God continued to burden my heart as He did the previous week in Ghana, and then now, seeing people that are for sale today. And so, with that burden, I went back to the airport and got on a plane and came back home. And at the time, I was actually just living just up the road in St. Louis. And I was working at a restaurant, and I would get off work around sometimes like at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. And so it was pretty late, and I was on my way home. And I came up to a four-way stop that I would come to every single night just outside my apartment complex. And as I stopped at the stop sign, then started to go through the intersection, the car that had been on my left kind of raced through and cut me off right in the middle of the street on purpose. And the man driving the other car, he leaned over and he started to roll down his passenger window to say something to me. And so I started to roll down my window to hear what he had to say. And as I'm looking at this guy kind of face to face, then something starts to interrupt our vision of each other. And there had been a little girl sitting down on the floorboard of his car, like in the passenger seat. And she kind of got up and she sat in the passenger seat. Now I can't see his face, I can just see hers. And I started to notice she just got these little pigtails coming off the side of her head and little pink bows on the ends of them. And the man then tells me she's 8 years old, and he wants to just know if I'll just permanently just buy this girl from him. And again, I'd just been in Ghana 2 weeks ago, or at the time. And then in Amsterdam, I'm seeing people for sale, like the adults there. And then now I'm back home, I'm in my own neighborhood, and someone wants to sell me this 8-year-old girl. So God just used these 3 experiences just in a 2-week period of time to kind of place this call and burden in my heart. My wife, Shayla, here on the front row, she also had kind of a similar experience, a totally different trip and at a different point in different years. But she went to actually Brussels, and she was working, doing a Convoy of Hope internship for a summer there, or for a winter. And I always say summer, but it was during winter time. And she went to go explore Amsterdam with her friend one day. And so they went up there, and they were kind of walking around town. And they were kind of eating at this outdoor kind of cafe area, and there's trains going by, and there's people on their bikes ringing their bells, and just everyone's talking and whining and dining. It's just really loud, and everyone's having a great time just in town. And they noticed a church kind of like the one you see here on the slide. There's this big church. They wanted to go in and just take a moment out of their day and just kind of pray and just pray for the area, pray for the town. So they go in, they kind of open these big, kind of wooden doors of this church, and as they kind of step through, and those big wooden doors, shut behind them, and all that sound from kind of outside just starts to disappear as that door closes, and just so just kind of this silence. And I think as a parent of young kids, I know that silence can be pretty amazing, can't it, Blake? You don't always get a lot of that. So especially if you're on a long road trip, silence can be an amazing thing. I think just as a therapist, silence can be a wonderful thing, like just in a session with one of my clients. That's often when they really think, and sometimes when they really begin to process things emotionally and mentally. And it can be a real nice tool. But I think sometimes silence can also point out things that are wrong and things that are unhealthy. And if there's silence in your marriage, that's probably not good. There's other areas in our lives where if there's silence, and that's pointing out something that's kind of dead, or something that's unhealthy, or something that's wrong. And Shayla was sitting there in this church and experiencing this silence in a church with all the kind of life outside of the church. And God was just kind of using that, just that kind of that metaphor at the time, just to kind of show her and to speak to her of just the spiritual darkness that's happening in Europe right now, and just that the church literally is empty. But then God sent a couple other people into the church, and they came up to them, and they actually asked if they could join my wife and her friend in prayer. And so they prayed with 2 other strangers. And even just kind of in that process, God kind of showed them that it is struggling, but there are things happening, and there is hope, and there is momentum that's about to start. So here shortly after we got married, I shouldn't have said that. I got to do math myself. Shortly after we got married, several years ago, we'll go with 13 years ago. we became U.S. missionaries about 12 years ago at that point. And we've been working to fight human trafficking ever since then. We did our first term in Las Vegas, where we were able to work with a shelter for adults, female survivors of human trafficking, do a lot of missing kids searches, and also serve like on task forces and coalitions and that kind of thing. And then following Las Vegas, we came back here to Missouri to open and operate a shelter for 10 to 20-year-old girls who were survivors of sex trafficking. And I think it was during that point in our ministry with the teenagers when I probably earned, all like 400 or 500 gray hairs that I have on my chin. It was we loved it. It was exactly what we wanted to do. God gave us the opportunity to do it, but also just running a shelter that never closes 24/7. You got 17 staff that calling you at 3 o'clock in the morning because there's some type of an issue, and it literally never stops. And the type of work and the people you're working with is just heavy and dark, and it can be just quite a bit. So I think if you look at some old pictures of me, even just the one that's on the screen, I suppose, you'll kind of like those presidential pictures when their first day in office and their last day in office. It didn't look like 4 years. It looked like it was a little bit longer than that. But it was also, in this point in our ministry when we really saw God do just so many amazing things, like in the hearts and the lives of the girls who lived in the shelter, but also in the staff and the volunteers who served them and served God in that way there as well. And then just this past year, God kind of spoke to us and kind of began to change some things up in our life, and he opened the door for us to actually go back to the Netherlands, where he called both Shayla and me into missions. So after 12 years in U.S. missions, we have now just switched to world missions, and now we're headed to the Netherlands. And we're thrilled to accept this new assignment. We're in a country where only 4% of the population claims to have a relationship with Jesus. There's a local pastor there that has said that the number of Christians in the country is so few that most Dutch people will go their entire lives without ever even meeting a Christian. So that's just quite unfathomable for those of us who grew up here in the States, and especially here in the Midwest, to not ever even like bump into a Christian like at a grocery store or at the movie theater, or even have like a praying aunt or a praying grandma or somebody in your life who knows God and who cares about you as well. Most of them don't have anyone in their lives like that. And as we've been preparing for this change and going to the Netherlands, looking into their culture and those kinds of things, there's been a scripture that's been sticking out to me this past year, one that we all know, it's very familiar to all of us, but God's just kind of been showing me a little bit of a different depth and look into it. So Mark 10:25, there Jesus is speaking. He says, "It is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for someone who is rich to enter the kingdom of God." And we're kind of going into a scenario that's almost the exact opposite of what Alex was speaking about, where he said there's tens of thousands of homeless just in that one city. We've been told that there's no homeless at all in the Netherlands. Now, we were there 2 weeks ago. We saw one guy, and that was, we've been there 3 times each, and I have only seen one homeless person ever. And so it is a very different scenario and a different type of mission field for sure. One thing that we're doing all the mission trips that I've done, and my wife growing up as a missionary kid who grew up in El Salvador, and her parents have been missionaries there for 42 years at this point. We're used to types of ministries where you're often meeting someone's physical needs in some way. You're feeding them, or you're offering them like a backpack or shoes or somewhere to sleep or to stay, or there's some type of a need that we're meeting, and those are all wonderful and good things, and we should be doing those for other people. But they're also, they can open up opportunities. They can kind of ease people into conversation with you. When you don't have any of those things to offer somebody, I think it does make it a little bit different. So we'll never have a backpack drive. We'll probably never have a feeding program or anything like that in the Netherlands. I will be the poorest friend that probably any of them have ever had. And so it'll be a different kind of position that we're in. But I think it's a really kind of cool and unique position to where they need nothing from me except for Jesus. And with only 4% of the population even claiming to have a relationship with them, and with most of them never even meeting one in their entire lives, I've got a pretty important thing. I've got probably the most important thing, the one thing that they don't have. And so it's a really interesting place for kind of God to put you and to use us. They've been discovering, just kind of as a people and as a culture, they've been discovering over the years as they do have everything that they can purchase, they can accumulate, that having everything is ultimately anticlimactic if they don't have God, and then it's thus depressing. And so I'd like to introduce you to a Dutch girl. Her name is Zariah. On the next slide, Chloe. Zariah was 28 years old when she made the decision to be euthanized. She was actually 29 years old when it happened, just this past May. Euthanasia has become such a problem in the country that it was actually 5.5% of their deaths last year. They're the first country to legalize a lot of things, like same-sex marriage, various drugs, but they're the first country to legalize euthanasia, and now they've legalized euthanasia even for minors. And so just to kind of give you a little glimpse into the mission field that we're entering and the mindset of a lot, not all the Dutch people, but the mindset of a lot of them, and of just kind of the mindset of the culture. I have a few quotes from Zariah I'd like to share with you. Now, she shared these online on her social media platforms. She broadcasted kind of her process with her doctors a lot and did an interview with a newspaper and that kind of thing. So I'm pulling that from these. She says, "I have a little house, 2 jolly cats, and a boyfriend who loves me dearly, and I love him. I have everything, but that everything is not enough to live for. I did not want to burden my partner with having to keep a grave tidy. We have not yet picked an urn, but that will be my new house." And then she went on to tell a reporter that the day it happens, the day when a doctor comes over to euthanize her, she didn't want to have any music playing in her house. And I thought that was kind of particularly depressing. She's on the next slide here. She says, "The doctor really takes her time. It is not that they walk in and say, 'Lay down, please.' Most of the time it is first a cup of coffee to settle the nerves and create a soft atmosphere. Then she asks if I am ready. I will take my place on the couch. She will once again ask if I am sure, and she will start at the procedure and wish me a good journey, or in my case, a nice nap. I hate it if people say, 'Have a safe journey.' I'm not going anywhere." Now, about a year ago, when we kind of accepted this offer and kind of this new assignment to go to the Netherlands, there was a lot of things we knew about the Netherlands, but I'm sure there's tons more that we don't know. And we've only, at that time, we'd only visited, each of us, twice in our life, and for short periods of time. And this is definitely one of the things that we didn't know about the culture and about the people and the things that they're that they're struggling with. And as we've kind of dived into this issue a little bit over this past year, it's just kind of really stuck out to me. It's just something that I think it wasn't a part of our kind of assignment. It's not a part of necessarily what our leadership is intending for us, but I do think it's something that God is gonna use our family in to minister to the people who are struggling in this way. Partly just because I myself am a therapist, and so I suppose I can be helpful. But then also, I think just aside from just kind of career things and professional skills and whatnot, just personally, this would be also close to my heart too. So just in my only, 42 years of living, I've had 8 friends commit suicide. And so, except for maybe some of my military friends, that seems to be a pretty high number. I don't think most people could say that. So I think in some way, God has kind of prepared me perhaps for this culture and this struggle that they're experiencing. And I guess it'd be odd to say I'm excited about that. That's kind of, but I do think, in some way, I kind of am. I'm eager to see how God is going to use, I guess, both of those things, and kind of redeem some of those negative things in my past and in my life, to show, reveal Him to these people, and to show them, love and joy, and introduce them to God, and just have them just see their lives transform, and really get to meet their Creator in the proper way. It's not all bad news. I know this is normally probably much quieter and more depressing than any other Sunday you've ever had here, but it's not all bad news. So the good news is that, like what God kind of showed Shayla about 15 or 18 years ago in that church in the Netherlands, that when those two people came and joined her for prayer, there is a church, and there is growth, and there is things happening. In fact, just this past May, there was 60,000 people that gathered in a park to celebrate Pentecost and worship God. They, as I mentioned, most of Western Europe is only around 2% Christians. In fact, just the neighbors like Belgium, they're only at 1.3%, and so it's a very low number, but the Netherlands has been growing considerably, and now it's at about 4% Christians there in the country. One thing that happened when we were visiting about a year and a half ago, my wife and I, and Blake, he was with us, and we were eating at a restaurant. Actually, we can go back to the previous slide real quick. We were eating at a restaurant kind of like along a canal, like what you see here in the picture, and it was a Thai restaurant. There was not a lot of spicy food in the area. We were looking for spicy food. Blake and I like to sweat while we eat, and so we found a Thai restaurant, and we were sitting down, and the table came, and they sat down next to us, and it was just a young couple, around 30 years old or so, and they got their food before us, and they prayed over their meal. And so that kind of really stuck out to us, because we had just previously been told just a few days earlier that most Dutch people would go their whole lives without ever even meeting a Christian. And so I thought, I've only been here for about 4 days, and I think I see one, And so I thought, well, that's, what are the odds of that, And so I struck up a conversation with them, and we kind of wanted to know what they were eating, because Blake really thought that their food looked pretty good. He wanted to order the same meal. And so we had a little bit of a conversation. And then after that, they got up and they left. And as they were passing by, the man patted me on the shoulder, and he just said, hey, he was just kind of happy that we were visiting the country. And he said, I hope you enjoy the rest of your trip and your time here, and God bless. So then I kind of grabbed his arm, because I was like a little too curious. And I was like, hey, would you guys happen to be Christians? And they both they really lit up, and like, yeah, we are Christians. In fact, we're pastors. I thought, oh, wow, well, that's quite a coincidence. I was like, okay, well, I know it's kind of small, but have you ever heard of the Assemblies of God? And they said, yeah, that's what we are. And so, and while we were on this trip, we were it was kind of like somewhat of a vision trip. Like we were going to explore if this is, really where God was wanting to put us. And one thing that we weren't able to schedule in this whole time was actually a meeting with a pastor. Everyone we had tried to meet with was all out of the country for a funeral or a wedding or a vacation, and there was no one to meet with. And so we met with a missionary, but we didn't get to meet any of the Dutch pastors. And so God kind of knew exactly what we were trying to accomplish in our trip, and things that we needed, and that were just kind of good for us to have some confirmation in. And so even though we couldn't schedule, he just kind of gave us one. And so we've friends with, his name is Van Dam, and so we've been friends with Pastor Van Dam for about a year and a half now. And I thought, coming to share with you all about just what is God doing in the Netherlands, since we haven't really lived and served there yet, I thought, well, who better to really give you the proper update other than like a Christian in the Netherlands, and specifically even a pastor, and even more specifically one who's in our fellowship of the Assemblies of God. So here on the next slide here, it says, from Pastor Van Dam, he wanted you to know that there is a growing number of teens and young adults who are unashamed of the gospel and active with evangelism, both on the streets but also online, and there is a growing tendency for churches to work together. Some traditional churches are closing due to decreasing numbers of members and income, are selling their churches to evangelical and Pentecostal churches. And so there's kind of like the church that Shayla went into quite a while back that was just empty. A lot of these churches throughout all of Europe, they are empty, or they are like their bookstores, or their bars, or their coffee shops, or they're all kinds of different things. But now the growing church, the Pentecostal church, is able to come back and kind of buy back these sacred properties and reopen them as churches. And the community knows these to be a church. I mean, and they look like a church. And so it's very strategic, and it's working out very well. And so it's called actually the VPA, but that's the Assemblies of God in the Netherlands. They've been implementing a church planting model, and they've been growing quite a bit, and so they would like our help to kind of help propel that even more forward. We recently just came across an article by a Dutch pastor who had moved from the Netherlands to the United States, and while he was here, God actually kind of got a hold of his heart for his homeland and for his own people, and it was showing him just the low numbers, and that only 4% of them would claim to know God. And so God called this Dutch person back from the United States to the Netherlands. And in doing that, he wrote this quote in this article that he just recently put out. He said, whoever you are, wherever God has placed you, let me encourage you. Commit yourself to the local church. The local church is the center of God's action in the world. So that's where you want to be. Christ is building his church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. And if you have a desire for missions, let me encourage you. Commit yourself to the local church. The local church is how God is fulfilling the Great Commission. So that's where you want to be. If you don't know where to go yet, consider Western Europe. It's a mission field. Come on over and help. And so, we were reading that after we'd already committed, but maybe some of you, maybe God's tugging on your heart to either go to Costa Rica or to come to the Netherlands. But we're honored to accept this new assignment to go and continue ministering to survivors of human trafficking over there as well, but also join up along the VPE, the Assemblies of God of the Netherlands, in their church planting goal. They're trying to plant 100 churches in the next 10 years right now. And as I've been saying that goal over the past year, it just kind of dawned on me recently that I've been saying 100 churches in the next 10 years for about a year now. So I was like, are we on year 9? Or kind of like, where are we with this goal? And so Shayla and I were actually just over there 2 weeks ago. And so I asked him, I said, I've been saying this for a little bit. Like, has the goal started yet? Are we still saying 10 years? Or is it, are we already into the goal at some point? And they said, yeah, we're actually 4.5 years into this goal. I said, I was kind of, where are we at in the number, that's maybe the second part of that piece. And they said, we're right on target. They've planted 45 churches in 4.5 years. And so exactly what God kind of put on their hearts to make a very ambitious goal. I mean, the Netherlands is only a quarter the size of Missouri. It does have 3 times the population, but it's only a quarter of the landmass of our state. And so to plant 100 churches there is quite, and especially in that secular environment where so few people believe in God at all. It's quite an ambitious goal, but it's been really cool and encouraging to see that God, that God gave them that goal. He gave them that goal because he's going to fulfill that goal, and because he's already been doing it. And he's already been bringing that to fruition. So it was super exciting to see that come to pass. So we're just thrilled to go and do that, and just thank you guys so much for kind of being one of our Antiochs and pouring into us with your prayers and your finances and sending us out all these years to throughout the states to search for missing kids and work in these shelters for survivors of trafficking, and now going to do similar work and also church planting in the Netherlands. You guys, in fact, have been supporting us every month faithfully, I think without ever missing 1 month for 11 years now. So thank you guys so much for all you do for us. Pastor, if you'd like to close us out here. Just thank you so much for the invitation to you and Sarah. We've just love it here and love you guys.